Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Szyminski, and welcome back to the Human Body Systems Training Kit. In this video, we're going to be talking about Lesson 3. Of all of the investigations in this kit, Lesson 3 is going to take you the most time to set up and teach the students about safety during wet labs, as well as assigning jobs to different students, and to thoroughly review each of the steps in the procedure. It's a fairly complicated procedural investigation, but with enough preparation that kids seem to do very well with it. It's also very heavy in materials, so make sure that you give yourself ample time to set this up. The procedure as it's presented in the book is not actually as straightforward as the others. Therefore, I strongly suggest either trying this experiment yourself first or speaking one-on-one with someone who's done the experiment and possibly even rewritten it. When you're managing the materials, it's also easiest if you label and number everything for the students. That way they can focus on what they're doing instead of trying to figure out which scoop and which pipette go with which test tube. Safety is also very important during this lab. It's the first time for most of my 6th grade students that they've ever used any sort of chemicals. I talk to them a lot about cross-contamination and why we need to number things and only use them with specific materials so that we're not mixing things, as well as the hot pot. The hot pot is boiling water. You want to make sure that kids understand what's going to happen if they lean over that boiling water. And you want to make sure they're wearing gloves and goggles as well. During this lesson, there is a ton of new vocabulary, and I like to actually pre-teach the vocab so that the kids can have an accurate and authentic dialogue when they're discussing with each other. So one of the things that I like to tell them about as well is that they're going to learn what an indicator is and how it's used to determine the properties of different substances. This is, their first time creating a chemical reaction for the most part. Students are going to begin their inquiry into understanding how foods function in our body, starting with carbohydrates, and it's very vocabulary heavy. And especially for classes with IEP students, whether it's sub-separate or inclusion, as well as ELL students, using a variety of ways to pre-teach the vocab is very helpful. I like to do a picture with each of the definitions and words. For the multilingual class, we also translate some of the words. This is also a good time to teach students about how to record their work and why it's important to create a lab report. It helps them keep their notes and observations organized as well. I have my students do it right in the notebook. Because this is such a detailed and important lesson, the first time that students are conducting this experiment is the most important, because when you get to Lesson 4, it's very, very similar. They're just using different materials instead of the food portion. So I allow them to make mistakes and to learn from them. Because the next one is going to be so similar, but it's important to make any corrections to procedural errors as soon as possible. In order to discuss the goal of the experiment, which is which foods have sugar and which have starch, the procedure for the experiment, and how to write their lab report are all going to be very important things to set up before you even begin to approach this activity. I rewrite the procedure for my students mainly because I like them to have all of their information in one spot, and I like them to record their results and have their procedure side by side. For my English language learners, this is very helpful. We don't actually use the book at all for this lesson because the procedure is much more complicated. You also want to make sure that students are understanding the results chart that's in the back of the book. So in this picture, your students will end up with these results. And they're going to wonder what the purple is, because the purple is not actually listed in the book. The purple is the egg white test tube, and that happens because we're testing for sugar, and the egg white is protein, so it's not even the same category. You also want to be very careful because some of the boys that tend to be boys tend to be colorblind more often than girls, and I've had a number of students not be able to tell the difference between the blues and the greens, as well as the different shades of orange and the different shades of blue. You can use the results chart that's in the student book. You can also print out this picture and use this. This is one that I did myself. It's also helpful if you divide the jobs before you start the experiment so that each student knows what they're supposed to be in charge of. So for example, I have a reader who reads the procedure, a recorder who records the data and observations, a manager who oversees safety and makes sure that everybody's on task, and the getter who's in charge of materials management for that group. In the teacher's guide, you'll find the master. And I also have students make their own master in their notebook to keep themselves organized. I like to be sure that I only have 1 or 2 students at the hot pot at a time from each table. Otherwise, things start to get broken, kids start to get burned by the water, people are pushing each other out of the way just to get to this area. While the hot pot is a much safer way than using a flame, it is still boiling water, and it's important that the kids take that seriously. Overall, it's a very fun experiment, but there's a lot that goes into it. So I would allow yourself at least a week to set up the pre-teaching, going over the procedure, going over all of the rules and regulations you have for safety in your classroom, as well as giving the students their jobs and things like that. All of that week leading up to this experiment is very important for the success of the actual experiment. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.